My sister didn't collapse because she was in pain. She collapsed because I was finally being seen. And that had always been the trigger. The difference this time was that I already knew it was coming. I had known for years, just not in a way anyone else was willing to accept. To them, it looked like another emergency. Another moment where everything had to stop because something was wrong with her again. Because she needed help. Because she was fragile in a way that demanded immediate attention. But to me, it wasn't sudden, and it wasn't real. It was a pattern I had watched too many times to ignore. A sequence of behaviors that repeated with such precision, it stopped feeling like coincidence a long time ago. The timing was always perfect. Never random. Always placed exactly when I had something that belonged to me. Something worth acknowledging. Something that shifted attention away from her. And when I stood there that night, announcing my promotion, watching the room turn toward me for once, I could already see it forming behind her expression. The pause. The calculation. The moment she realized she was no longer the center of everything. That was when she decided to take it back. So, when her hand moved to the right side of her body and her voice dropped into that familiar tone, calling for our mother like she always did, I didn't react. I didn't move toward her. I reached for my phone instead. Because this time, I had already recorded exactly how it would happen. Emma hadn't always been like this. And that was the part that made everything easier for people to defend for far too long. Because they were holding on to a version of her that no longer existed. She was born early. Fragile in a way that made every small improvement feel like a victory. Every breath, something worth celebrating. And for the first few years of her life, the fear was real. My parents built their entire world around keeping her alive, adjusting everything, prioritizing her needs above anything else. And I accepted that because it made sense. She needed more. I understood that. But what they never noticed was that while her body was getting stronger, something else was forming underneath that constant attention. She learned early that being vulnerable gave her control. That weakness wasn't a limitation. It was leverage. Something that could shift the entire environment in her favor without resistance. And because no one ever challenged it, because no one wanted to believe she could misuse something that had once been real, it evolved quietly. The machines disappeared. The hospital visits stopped. The diagnosis faded into something that no longer defined her physically. But the response it created in everyone else never changed. If anything, it became automatic. Immediate concern. Immediate adjustment. Immediate sacrifice. And Emma learned how to trigger it without needing a real reason. At first, it was small. Headaches when she didn't want to do something. Fatigue when expectations were placed on her. But over time, it became more precise. More intentional. She didn't just react to situations. She controlled them. And the more it worked, the less she needed to question it. Because in her mind, she wasn't lying. She was maintaining the only system where she mattered more than anyone else. At first, I told myself it was coincidence, because it was easier than accepting what it actually meant. Headaches during homework. Stomach pain before school events. Sudden exhaustion when something required effort. All of it could still fit into the version of her everyone believed in. The fragile one. The one who still needed protection. But patterns don't stay hidden when they repeat often enough. And hers didn't just repeat. They aligned. She didn't get sick randomly. She got sick when I mattered. When I made varsity, she collapsed before my first game even started. And my parents left before I stepped onto the field. When I got accepted into college, she ended up in the emergency room before we could finish dinner. And the entire night shifted away from me without hesitation. When I brought someone home, when I had plans, when something in my life required attention that wasn't hers, she found a way to interrupt it with precision that felt less like timing and more like intention. And every time it happened, the outcome was the same. Conversations stopped. Focus shifted. I disappeared from the moment entirely while she became the center of everything again. What made it worse wasn't just the repetition. It was the awareness behind it. The way she looked at me when no one else was paying attention. The small smile that never reached her eyes. The satisfaction of knowing she had taken something back without anyone questioning how or why. That was when I stopped seeing it as a condition and started seeing it as control. Because this wasn't about pain anymore. It was about ownership of every moment that didn't belong to her. By the time I started trying to explain what I was seeing, it was already too late for anyone to hear it the way I meant it. Emma had built her version of reality too carefully, too consistently, layering it over years of behavior that made her look vulnerable and me look unstable whenever I questioned it. The first time I brought it up, I didn't accuse her directly. I just pointed out the timing. How it always seemed to happen when something important was happening for me. How the same patterns kept repeating in ways that didn't make sense if it was actually random. My parents didn't hear concern in my voice. They heard resentment. They heard jealousy. And Emma made sure they did. Quiet comments when I wasn't around. Small distortions of conversations. Turning my frustration into something harsher. Something crueler than it actually was. Until the version of me they saw wasn't someone trying to understand what was happening, but someone who couldn't handle sharing attention with a sick sister. And once that image existed, everything I said only reinforced it. If I stayed calm, I was cold. If I got upset, I was insensitive. If I tried to explain myself, I was overreacting. There was no version of this where I was believed. Because she had already defined the roles we were both playing. And the more I tried to push against it, the more I became exactly what she needed me to be. That was when I stopped trying to fight it directly. Not because I gave up, but because I understood something I hadn't before. I wasn't going to win by reacting to what she was doing. I was going to win by understanding how she did it. Once I stopped reacting and started observing, everything became clearer in a way that felt almost clinical. Like I wasn't watching my sister anymore, but a system repeating itself with too much consistency to be ignored. I paid attention to details no one else thought mattered. Not what she said, but how she said it. Not just when she got sick, but what happened immediately before and after. And the more I watched, the more structured it became. She always grabbed the right side of her body, no matter what kind of pain she claimed to be in. Head, stomach, it didn't matter. It was always the same side. She always called for our mother first, never our father, because she knew exactly who would respond emotionally instead of logically. When asked to rate the pain, she never hesitated for long, but never answered immediately either. Always pausing just enough to make it feel real, and always landing between an 8 and a 9. Never lower. Never high enough to seem exaggerated. And the duration was always the same. 2 to 3 hours. Just long enough to completely erase whatever moment had existed before her performance began. Once I saw it all together, it stopped feeling like behavior and started feeling like design. This wasn't something she was improvising. It was something she had perfected over time. And that was when I understood that exposing her in the moment would never be enough. Because she would always adapt. Always redirect. Always find a way to shift the narrative back in her favor. If I wanted it to end, I needed something she couldn't change. Something that didn't rely on belief or interpretation. I needed proof that existed before she even began. When I pressed play, the room didn't react immediately. Because at first, they didn't understand what they were watching. My voice came through the phone. Calm. Steady. Detached in a way that didn't match the situation unfolding in front of them. Describing exactly what was about to happen before it finished happening. The timing. The movement. The words she would use. Even the way she would hold her body. All laid out with precision that made it impossible to ignore once they started connecting it to what they were seeing in real time. I watched their expressions shift one by one. Confusion turning into recognition. recognition into something heavier that no one wanted to say out loud. Emma stopped halfway through her performance, her hand still pressed against her side, her breathing uneven. Not from pain this time, but from something else she couldn't control. For the first time in years, she wasn't directing the moment. She was trapped inside it, unable to adjust, unable to redirect, because everything she was doing had already been exposed before she could finish it. I paused the video and looked at her. Not with anger, not even with satisfaction, but with something final. "This isn't new," I said quietly. "You've just never been caught before." And in that moment, everything she had built didn't fall apart loudly. It disappeared completely, leaving nothing behind to defend.